Snow drifted across the abandoned trail like pale ash from some old celestial fire, and Calder Holt almost rode past the small shape collapsed beside the fallen pine. But instinct, sharpened by years of solitude in the mountains, made him slow his stallion and narrow his eyes. The wind shifted, revealing the faint outline of a young woman, a fragile figure half buried in white, trembling in a way that suggested both cold and fear. Calder dismounted without a word, boots crunching against the frost as he knelt beside her. Her lips moved, barely forming sounds, until one breath finally broke free. "I have nothing on." The confession was not flirtation, not coyness, but raw shame, an apology from someone who had already learned to expect punishment. Calder felt something twist inside him, an old ache he thought grief had sealed away years ago. He removed his heavy coat and wrapped it around her shoulders with careful hands, as though she were a frayed quilt that might come apart if touched too quickly. Her skin was shockingly cold beneath his fingers. She flinched, not at him, but at the world itself, as though every breath carried a memory she did not want. She tried rising, failed, and whispered another apology for taking up space she believed she did not deserve. Calder scooped her into his arms, steadying her head against his chest. The movement felt strangely familiar, though he could not place why. He mounted the horse with her in his lap, balancing her weight while guiding the stallion back toward his cabin. Her shivers worsened during the ride, but she never begged for warmth, never clung to him, she simply endured. That quiet endurance unsettled him more than fear would have. Inside the cabin, the lamplight cast a golden glow over the wooden walls, softening the sharp angles of the room. Calder set her down on the edge of the bed, turned his gaze away to give her what dignity he could, and found a blanket thick enough to shield her from the air. The fire crackled, throwing sparks like tiny warnings. She held the blanket close, trying to disappear into its folds, her eyes darting toward the door as though expecting someone far crueler to step through it. "What's your name?" Calder asked gently. "Ilara," she said, barely louder than the flame's hiss. Her voice quivered not from cold but from the strain of holding back some story too painful to spill. Calder did not press her, but he recognized trauma when he saw it. That haunted bewilderment in her gaze. He had once seen it in himself after burying the woman he loved. Grief taught him how to hold silence for others, and so he tended the fire instead of demanding answers. The scent of pine resin filled the cabin, soothing and warm, but Ilara kept her shoulders hunched as though bracing for a blow. Minutes passed before she spoke again, the words slipping out as involuntary shivers shook her. "I didn't mean to be found." Calder turned, surprised by the honesty in her tone. "No one means to be left freezing in the snow." She closed her eyes, but tears still escaped, tracing thin lines down her cheeks. She wiped them quickly, ashamed even of crying. Calder waited. Experience had taught him that some truths must be allowed to crawl out on their own. Finally, she whispered, "I was taken from the stage trail. They made me." Her breath stuck as if caught on broken memories. "They left when they finished their fun. I thought the snow would take me quietly." Calder felt heat rise in his chest, not anger that burned wild, but a deeper, quieter fury that froze itself into resolve. He did not touch her, not yet. Gentleness required patience, and trust could not bloom under pressure. Instead, he pulled a chair closer to the bed but kept enough space so she wouldn't feel cornered. Ilara watched him cautiously, the blanket clutched high to her chin. "You're safe now," he said. "This place. No one crosses my land unless they're welcomed." She studied him as though trying to determine whether such safety could exist for someone who had been stripped of dignity only hours earlier. Her fingers gripped the blanket, knuckles whitening, but the trembling slowed. Calder noticed every detail. The way she hid her hands, the way she angled her body to face the wall, the way her breaths carried both exhaustion and disbelief. Each movement revealed more about her than any confession could. Survival had carved itself into her bones. The storm outside intensified, snow thrashing the windows with restless fingers, but inside, warmth slowly reclaimed the edges of the room. Ilara's eyelashes drooped, her body finally surrendering to fatigue. Calder remained seated, watching over her with the silent vigilance of a man who knew the cost of failing to protect someone. When she finally slept, her breathing evening out into soft sighs, he placed another log on the fire and let himself exhale fully for the first time since he found her. A stranger now rested in his bed, wrapped in the coat once belonging to the life he had lost. Yet something about Alara's fragile presence felt less like an intrusion and more like a summons, one he hadn't prepared for. He stepped outside for a moment, letting the cold air bite at his face. Above him, the mountains loomed jagged and solemn, as if judging the strange turn his life had taken. Calder scanned the tree line, alert for any sign of the men who had abandoned her. The forest held its breath, quiet but watchful. He returned inside, checked the door latch twice, then lifted his gaze to Alara again. The firelight made her appear almost serene, but the faint crease between her brows reminded him that sleep does not erase fear, it merely suspends it. Calder knew this encounter was not ending here. The men who hurt her might circle back. The town would undoubtedly talk if he sought help. And Alara, wounded to her core, would awaken unsure whether she deserved shelter at all. Still, as he watched her, he felt a shift, subtle but real. Her arrival had torn open something he had allowed to calcify. Whether this was fate or misfortune, he could not yet decide. But one truth settled as solidly as the snow on the roof. Alara Wynne had entered his life broken, terrified, and fragile as frost. Yet somehow, in lifting her from the cold, he had lifted something in himself as well. And whatever storm waited beyond the cabin walls, it would have to pass through him first. The morning light seeped into the cabin like a gentle apology, brushing Alara's sleeping face with a gold so soft it almost erased the terror that had shaped her the night before. Calder watched silently from the far side of the room, hands wrapped around a tin cup of cooling coffee. Something in her posture had changed overnight. The way she curled beneath the blanket looked less like someone bracing for pain and more like someone who finally allowed herself to rest. When she stirred, her eyes opened slowly, searching the room with the wary caution of a doe stepping from the tree-line. But when her gaze met his, the tension in her shoulders eased ever so slightly. That small softening struck Calder deeper than any spoken gratitude could. She sat up, clutching the blanket as though it were a fragile shield. Calder didn't move, respecting the fragile trust between them. Alara cleared her throat, the sound thin but steadier than before. "I didn't think I'd wake," she murmured, voice hoarse. "And if I did, I didn't expect to find safety still here." "You haven't lost it," Calder replied, setting the cup aside. "And you won't." There was no flourish in his tone, no heroic insistence, just a quiet truthfulness that slipped beneath her defenses. She lowered the blanket a fraction, revealing the faint blush of thawed skin along her collarbone. In the lamplight, she seemed to gather courage in small breaths. She tried standing, but her legs trembled with the memory of cold. Calder stepped forward instinctively, then halted before reaching her, letting her choose whether distance or support mattered more. After a moment's hesitation, she lifted her hand toward him, an unspoken request, and he gently steadied her. Her palm felt feather-light in his, yet the trust it carried was weightier than anything he'd held in years. Throughout the morning they moved through the cabin with a new, tentative rhythm. Calder prepared broth while Alara watched him from the table, studying his every motion like someone piecing together the nature of a stranger who had chosen kindness over convenience. He offered her the bowl, and she accepted it with both hands, inhaling the steam that promised warmth and survival. After sipping slowly, she set it down and spoke with deliberate control. "You should know, they might come back. Men like them don't like loose ends." Calder had already considered this, but the steadiness in her voice told him she no longer wished to be hidden behind silence. "If they do," he said, "they won't find you helpless again." Alara looked down at her bowl, fingers tracing its rim. "I don't want to be a burden." "You're not," Calder answered. "A life isn't a burden." The way her breath shook at those words revealed more wounds than she dared explain. But she nodded, accepting the truth even if she didn't fully believe it yet. By midday, Alara felt strong enough to step outside. Calder walked beside her but kept a respectful distance, offering presence without pressure. The world beyond the cabin was hushed beneath a thick quilt of snow, and Alara paused at the threshold as if unsure she deserved fresh air. When she finally crossed it, her bare feet sank into soft powder, her eyes widening at the cold's gentle bite. It wasn't the cruel, devouring cold of the night she was left to die. This cold felt honest, cleansing. Calder watched her take in the mountains, their peaks dusted like sugar, the pines standing tall with stoic grace. The sky stretched wide and pale, a canvas too large for despair. Ilara inhaled deeply, filling her lungs with something that felt almost like hope. Her posture straightened, and the woman who had whispered, "I have nothing on," now stood wrapped in borrowed warmth and a fragile newborn courage. But the peace fractured when a distant echo of laughter drifted through the trees, the unmistakable sound of coarse voices approaching. Ilara flinched, clutching the blanket tighter around herself. Calder moved close, alert but controlled, placing himself subtly between her and the direction of the sound. 3 riders emerged from the pines, their expressions curling into cruel recognition when they saw her. The leader smirked, flicking his reins. "Well, well. Thought we lost our winter toy." Ilara's body tensed, but she didn't retreat behind Calder. Her eyes remained fixed on the men who had stolen her dignity. Calder spoke first, voice even. "You'll turn your horses around and leave. She's not yours to hurt again." The men laughed, mocking him, but something in Calder's calm carried weight. Still, they drew closer, the leader leaning forward with predatory intent. Ilara stepped forward before Calder could stop her. Her voice trembled but did not break. "You left me to die," she said, each word shaped with strength she had not possessed the night before. "But I lived. And I won't go with you. Not now, not ever." The leader's smirk faltered, uncertainty flickering. Calder remained ready, but he did not need to speak. Ilara's defiance filled the clearing with a force more powerful than any weapon. The outlaws shifted uncomfortably, sensing the confrontation was no longer the one-sided cruelty they'd enjoyed. After tense silence, the leader spat into the snow and turned his horse. "Not worth the trouble," he muttered, riding off with the others grudgingly following. When the last hoofbeat faded, Ilara released a shuddering breath. Calder stepped beside her, not touching her, letting her victory belong wholly to her. She looked up at him with eyes glossy but bright, and in that moment, something soft settled between them. Mutual respect, shared survival, and an understanding that whatever bond had begun was no longer fragile. Calder guided her back inside where the fire still glowed, steady and warm. She sat by it, lifting her hands toward its heat, and for the first time since he'd found her, she smiled, small, unsure, but real. Calder felt his chest tighten, not with pain but with something he hadn't allowed himself in years, hope. "You saved me," she whispered. Calder shook his head gently. "You saved yourself. I was just here to witness it." Ilara touched the edge of the coat he had wrapped around her the night before. Then, "Stay here a while longer. I'd like someone to witness what I become." Calder's voice softened. "I'd like that too." Snow fell outside in peaceful flurries, no longer a threat but a blessing, and inside the cabin 2 wounded souls began stitching together a new beginning. Slow, tender, and full of promise. Their story, once forged in fear, now settled into the warm glow of hope, signaling the happiest ending neither had dared imagine.